Hello, Anne from Zoe here. Just a continuation of how we're going to make our Bridgerton inspired communion dress. Now we move on from the sleeves. We did the sleeves in the last video, but this is a very important part of it. In order to get the sleeves to puff out, we need, this is just a little bit of lining. So that's gathered, so that'll give it'll always stay puffed out, it won't collapse on you. Now here I have all that was involved in making the Bridgerton dress. I have it all cut out. There's the skirt, there's the bodice. Now with the bodice I am putting a cotton underneath here, and this we will be beading first. And the back, that is when you lay out how you do it. And then we have our skirt, that's the skirt back. It's going there and there. This is our front here, which will be gathered to the front of there. We have used bias binding for our sleeve and elastic. So what's missing from here are the beads that we are going to put on the top of the bodice. Okay, so now we're going to start to sew the pieces together, the bodice. So what we do here is we have the cotton attached at the back, and we start to tack it down so that it doesn't move during the beading. And if it started to move while you were beading, it'd have little puckers in it. So it's just a loose tacking, because this thread shall be removed later on when we're finished with the piece beaded. We have decided on that we're going to go with some pearls that are here, and it's a good investment to get this beading thread because it won't knot up as you're beading your pearls. I like to put a row of stitching down here, down the center. It just divides it up nicely, and it's just another way of stopping it from puckering. You don't have to knot your thread or finish it off, because you want that you can remove the thread very easily after beading. So I'm just going to do that. The center, I have a notch here and a notch there to mark the center. So you have your thread. Because it's white, sometimes you could use a different color of thread so that it'll be easier to remove, but because this is an embossed fabric, and it's for a communion dress, a very special dress, I don't want it in case it would ever stain the threads or that they will get caught. So I'm going to do a row of sewing across here, and then we will be ready to start the process of beadwork, which is very, very relaxing. And you sort of just decide on what beads you're going to put on or what design you're going to follow. Now we're not going to overly bead this bodice. Now there are many ways to do beading. This is down through the years, this is what I have found to be the simplest form. I like to put in a double thread in my needle. I think it keeps the fabric that bit more stable. Now the extra threads, I just trim them off. Now I can remove the pins. This is a beading mat which allows the pearls just to sit, they won't go all over the place. And this is a beading needle, it's a very fine needle. So here I just decide, so I'll just start, I put a few, I just go and you can pick a swirl that I don't know if you can tell from this, but this is like a Celtic design and it's got little swirls. So I'm going to put a bead just on each swirl. I think that will be, and it will be enough. Just start that off. Sometimes when you're threading a needle, if you find difficulty in threading it, some people put a card behind the needle and you can see the eye that little bit better. So I'm going to start at the neckline up here and just work, you know, to the left and then work out to the right. So there's my first swirl. So I'm going to do a little back tack here. We don't want these pearls coming undone. Beadwork is a bit time consuming. If you had what you use with embroidery, the big hoops, that can also help to keep your fabric in place. But if you don't, you know, it's only a small piece. So you see when you have the bead needles are nice and long. And you can pick up the pearls. This works really well if you have smaller beads. They can be quite difficult to pick up. So I'm going to continue on with this now. I'm inclined to pick them up because there are a little bit. So I'm going to avoid doing beadwork under the arms because sometimes that can cause a little bit of irritation. It also might get snagged in the sleeve if you have too much, especially if there were glass stones. It'll snag the fabric that bit more because you're all the time moving your arm. Then it's nice just, now I sort of go back on them and make sure that they're turned round to, you know, to face you. That the nice part of the bead is always looking up at you. So this is very relaxing, and if you're getting all stressed up or your thread gets knotted, just take a breath and hold it and just let it go then, and it'll just relax you. Now, isn't that just beautiful? It's amazing how a bit of extra work can just change the whole look of the fabric. this is what the back of it is like. And this is why you need this cotton fabric, because if you didn't have that there, it'd bunch up. Now, from working in fabrics, you may ask the question why I always have a scissors in my hand, and that is from working in factories. You got accustomed to always having your scissors or your little snippers in your hand. So I feel uncomfortable if I don't have my scissors in my hand. So that's the reason why I have it. Now, I'm not beading here around the neckline, because I want to make sure that when I'm sewing, the beads isn't getting caught in my machine. And if I need extra beads, then that's only a small piece that'll have to bead. Now I'm just finishing off there. This is how I'm just finishing off that thread there, just to show you, and just snip the thread. Now I'm just going to continue on with that. Now I am going to attach the bodice to the skirt at the back, and then I will insert my zip. I'm also going to finish off the edging of the skirt, and that I'm going to just turn it around like so. The side seams of this skirt is going to be done with the French seam. We won't be using any overlocking on it. So here I am going to just turn it back, and with this you do a small stitch. I am not doing this up where the zip is going to be. I'm just doing the skirt. This is useful for people who don't have overlockers, or that their zigzag in their machine isn't working that well, because this dupion, it's frays quite a lot. So that's that skirt, side back, and now I'm doing it. Now I am only doing this to the back seam. The side seams, as I said before, are going to be, they're going to have a French seam on them, which is what we put on the sleeve. Now those threads that are peeping out, I'm going to just trim them off later on. I'm going to now so now I am going to attach my back. So we're going to be putting a gathering stitch and fitting this in between here and here. Okay, so you put your stitch up to the longest stitch, your stitch length, the longest stitch. always grab the 2 threads quite tightly, because you just, if you don't, it can knot on you, and it can be very difficult to pull threads then. Just grab it tightly when you're pulling it away from the machine. So that's what that looks like there. So this is our seam. Our seam is turning around this way, so when you sew it, it'll be flat. So when you look on the inside, this is what your seam is going to look like. So I attach this. I am not overlocking the top, because this is going to be fully lined and it'll be inside, so it won't fray. So I match up my notches. Now for a full dress, I just tie that around there like so, and then I just pick a thread, pull your threads through so that you have your 2 threads coming facing you, like here. So we just gather this thread like that, and there it is nicely. Now this isn't a very full skirt, so you just divide it out nicely there, like so. Now shorten your stitch length, and we're just going to, a good tip is to always have your thread to the back of your machine, and then it won't get caught up. So a little back stitch here, and off you go. Make sure now it's all together like so, and that the gathers are evenly distributed. My seam allowance here is 1 centimetre. That is our back. That's all the inside. So I do the same to this one, this side here. Bring your thread through. Off camera, I have attached the skirt to the bodice, and I have inserted the zip at the back. In the front, I have, isn't it just lovely? I have attached the skirt to the bodice. Now I'm going to join them together using a French seam. Now what we do here is we flatten out our seam, the seam between the skirt and the bodice, and we have the 2 insides going matched up together, facing each other, or matched up together. So you make sure that your pin is so that that won't move, because you want a nice flush seam when you're finished on the finished garment. And of course you match your notches, but some patterns mightn't have notches. The most important thing is to have your seam line matching. So you're only using 1/2 centimetre for your seam, because you're going to have a trim back, and the other half will be used when you turn it around and sew it down here. So we'll just proceed on. As I said before, this is an excellent way if you don't to finish the inside of Dupion silk. If you have any other questions, please message us or in the comment box below. Now I'm going to go the other side, and you flatten out the seams like so. And you match them up. Now, when you're making these dresses, as you go along, you have your fittings to make sure that it's going to fit the child. Just a check for your length and the volume of the skirt. But if you've taken good measurements, it usually works out. Sometimes your fabric will move slightly, but that's not a problem because you're going to be trimming that off now. So I'm just going to get a scissors, and if I can get Anya to pass me scissors, thank you. And I just trimming it back as close to the stitching line as you can. Now I turn the dress inside out. And the important seam here to line up is this seam here. The seam, so I line that up with and I just make sure that I am just on the seam, and then I fold it back. And the beauty of the Dupion silk is that you get away without pressing this, because it takes a crease quite easily. So I put my thread to the back and I start off again with the back tack. And you can see where your seam is. You can feel it. So you sew this side. That is what your seam is like.
Don't panic, it's okay.
You go now to the other side and you match up your seam with your pin. Now it doesn't matter whether you start at the top or the bottom. The important part of this is that your seams, your sewing seams, are matched up nicely. Any questions, please leave in the comment box. If you want to see how to insert an invisible zip, if you want a more detailed explanation on that, please contact us. sew the sleeve, or sorry, the shoulder seam while we're here. That's also a centimetre. And then we have the outer part of the dress done. Our next part shall be sewn in our sleeves. I'll just turn it. See there, our seams is nicely lined up there. So we're going to attach our sleeves next. Now that we have our dress made, the main part of our dress, we're going to do the final preparation on our sleeve. Here we're going to attach these to the inside. We're going to match up our notches, and we're going to go back to the long stitch, and we're going to gather this because there's a bit of gather at the top of the sleeve. Now there's usually a notch for a double notch that denotes the back of the sleeve that will go to the back bodice. So here is our double notch, and we're going to put it to the back of our, line it up with our back panel, and we pin it at the underarm, and you can have one seam because it'd be quite bulky to have the two seams going together, so you'll have one going to the front and the other going to the back. And make sure, if you can at all, remember to do that the same in both sides. So now we get our sleeve. You're like looking into your sleeve to line it. So we want the gather on this sleeve to be mostly at the top. So we have our notch here to match our shoulder seam. And when you pin that, it's much easier then to divide out your gathers. These little nail scissors are great because it allows you, the punchiness of the scissors allows you to pull threads through. This can be a bit tricky because the sleeves are so small. There isn't that much gather there. And we go to the back. And we gather it out evenly there. Now make sure all your fabric is coming in, that it doesn't get caught, because the last thing you want is to have your sleeve in nicely and it's just threads going through. So you go back to here, and your seam allowance is a centimetre, and your threads are going to the back of the machine, and off we go again. And my thread has come out of my needle. It always happens at the wrong time. So this is, sometimes when you get caught up with your sewing, you can get a little bit frustrated. So times like this, it's good to just go, take a breath, and just relax. And the thread gets threaded. The needle gets threaded. I'm losing all sense. Off we go again. Now, especially with children's wear, I try to use a few pins as possible. I want to make sure that I've taken them all out. So usually keep an account on how many pins you're using. So after each piece that you do, take out your pins and make sure you put them away. This is my sleeve attached. This is what the sleeve looks like now. There it is there. So I am going to attach the other sleeve, and our piece of lining here, it's going to make sure that it stays puffed out and it won't collapse in. I'm going to prepare the frill. I have 4 lengths of fabric which I am going to attach at the seams, and I'm going to turn it up. Much easier to do at this stage to do the hem on your frill rather than when you have it attached to the dress. I suggest for people who are making these dresses that they fit the dress before you attach the frill to make sure that it's the right length for the child. Now, when you're sewing, there's where my seam is looking up at me, so I must attach this, because you don't want, when you have your length of fabric stitched together, that the seam is on the wrong side. If you wanted to put any lace or anything like that on the hem, now would be the time to do that. So now I am going to go back and start and turn a hem on this, and turning it down once
and then twice. It's only going to be a very small hem. As I have said before, if you have any queries or you want any more details, like inserting the zip, the sleeves, please comment, ask the question. Now, as you can see, this is fraying quite a bit from hanging around, but we can get those threads. I don't overpress this fabric. Silk dupion isn't a fabric that you press too much, because I feel you take the good out of it. Sometimes we can over press. Now we put this seam flat. Yeah, sometimes it needs a little bit of help to get across where the seams meet. These are just getting a little bit too much now, so I'm just going to trim them. Sometimes you can just ease them under the seam. This fabric, it absorbs fabric, so that's why there's, and now I have just run out of bobbin thread, so I will continue on to turn the hem up on this ruffle. Now I am starting to attach the ruffle. Now I have a ruffle, ruffling foot or a gathering foot. To start this off, I think it's always a good idea when you're doing with different feet, different attachments, is to practice on a few pieces of fabric first. With this foot, I need to open up at the hem of the dress so that it'll start off nicely. So a bit of an oversight there. I shouldn't have stitched it down the full way. So this is all my ruffle, and you have to make sure that your seams is facing the right direction. Now with mine, the ruffle or the frill is on the bottom, and the piece that I'm attaching it to is on the top. So mine just goes in here like so. And for this especially, make sure that you have enough thread in your bobbin because you do not want to stop midway in this. Now I have to have my stitch length long, so off I go. That is what it's looking at. Always check before you go too far. And my needle has just broke. My thread has just broke. This happens. So that's the ruffle that's there. Now we're at the stage where we're lining the dress. I've sewed up the lining. I've put tucks rather than gathers, French seam on the inside of the lining. For the gather, the ruffle here, we have overlocked that seam there. Those who haven't got an overlocker could put bias binding or a very tight zigzag. So to insert the lining, what we do is we line up the shoulder seams. So they're flattened out, and we get our pin, flatten out these seams, and we line them up. Now if you have any queries, please leave a message if you want to find out about putting in the zip or any of those other details. So we line that up like that, and we will be sewing around here on our machine a centimetre seam allowance. So to the machine I go.